All right, so yeah, I'm going to walk through some of the things that I tend to do with instructors in my role as as the liaison. I work with instructors to help them either kind of pedagogically think about what an ePortfolio might entail, but also just implementation-wise, how that would function, what it would look like, how we can get that set up as easily as possible, try to get away from the technological, perhaps, burdens of sorts and just make it work, basically. So we have our computer screen here. I'm in Learn. I'm going to go to my ePortfolio. And here I have a blank ePortfolio right now, so I'm just going to add some stuff into it as I go along, basically. But my ePortfolio is really implementing ePortfolio's advice and strategies, supporting your ePortfolio's initiatives. So I have kind of four main sections. I want to cover a brief introduction of sorts about what I can do with instructors in terms of these pedagogical influences. Look at some of the implementation potential. So some of the ways that we can implement ePortfolios in your courses or your programs or whatnot. Some of the resources that we do provide for instructors, and then also just, as we've seen a lot today, some various examples of what can in fact be done, just so you can see as well what it looks like in different disciplines, different fields and whatnot. So in terms of introduction, in terms of the ePortfolio support that I would provide then to instructors, one of the main ways that I kind of perceive this is that it really is trying to reduce this technological burden. I think a lot of times for instructors, they see what can in theory be done, but it's almost a hesitation of sorts because there's a lot of work that can potentially be behind using an ePortfolio. So if I can in any way make the implementation process a little bit smoother for you and the students, that's kind of one of my primary goals, at least. I want to make it as easy as possible for you. And any of the liaisons really, or Catherine as well, we're there to make this whole process as easy as possible. In effect, then, it's really making the focus on teaching more so than problem solving all the technical issues. Yes, at times issues will arise, but again, if we can make sure that you're focusing on making the implementation, good pedagogical influence, make the activities make sense, we can take care of the more techie kind of side of issues that may arise. And as well, in some of the consultations we may have with you when you're deciding, okay, I want to do ePortfolio, what can that in fact entail? We can talk through some of the strategies you might want to utilize, how you might want to set up perhaps sharing, how you might want to set up the goal behind it so that students are interacting with one another, collaborating, sharing feedback. All those possibilities exist with ePortfolios. It's a matter of, if we chat with you, can we come to some kind of idea of what this might in fact look like in effect? So ideally, take you from that towards more of this sense of overjoy that, oh, it's working correctly. So that's kind of the goal ultimately. And in terms of implementation potential, there's a variety of ways I would at least conceptualize this. I mean, to one extent, we can look at this on a program level, basically. So you have a degree program, and you want to see some sort of ePortfolio influence from maybe year 1 all the way up to year 4 in some sort of capstone course, to see development, to see growth in terms of writing potential or knowledge or whatnot. You can implement it in that way, and then we would perhaps get together with a group of colleagues and try to figure out, again, how to implement it in that way. At the same time, it can be just on a course level too, very individual. If you have a course and you want to see how students improve again from maybe week 1 to week 13 in terms of some kind of skill or knowledge or value, we can do that as well and just implement it on a course level basis. It might work thematically as well. Maybe you have a degree program and there's a few courses in that degree program that are closely linked thematically that students would tend to take all of those courses. Again, the ePortfolio might find its usage in that situation as well. And again, we would then ideally help you think about what that might look like and what you're actually trying to target and make your students address in that implementation. Other potential that you might want to think about with ePortfolios is that, do we want to apply a template or not? This was kind of talked about this morning, but the idea is that you could give the students a template, then they just kind of stick stuff into. There's a blank space and you want them to add a reflection on a certain topic. You give them that template and they fill in that information. That's one way of thinking about this, and then we could again help and actually create that template that you would then utilize. There's also, of course, the option of sharing that, again, as Randy Bass talked about, the social pedagogy element as well. We want the students to actually talk with one another and share, collaborate, those kind of things. If that's something you want to look for and incorporate in your ePortfolios, again, we can help assist you in getting that set up appropriately. Commenting as well. Again, that's one of the nice things about ePortfolios, getting feedback from your fellow students. We can make sure that it's thought about appropriately, that it's at the right place, that you're not overwhelming students with all this feedback, and make sure that, again, it works correctly in your ePortfolio, something you don't have to worry about. So I could throw in a comment there saying, what a great idea, Kyle, commenting. You know, those kind of things, stick into your own ePortfolios as well. In terms of some of the resources that we can do in your ePortfolios too, in our role there, one of the initial things we certainly would do then is help problem solve directly with the class after initial use of ePortfolios. So you might have your ePortfolio assignment in your class. Ideally, you want them to play with that ePortfolio in the first week or two so that they know what's going on, and that come week 13, they're not freaked out because they don't know how to utilize this tool. So if we could get them to do something initially and then speak directly with the class and say, okay, you submitted something, did it make sense? Could you follow along? Do you understand what you're doing? Capture that immediately before it gets to a point where it's difficult to problem solve, basically. Again, back to the idea of templates. If you want support in terms of actually creating templates and thinking about what that might entail, we can do that as well and help construct that actual course template. Of course, resolving issues as they arise. Again, trying to reduce that technological burden and place that more in our hands, and we can make sure that it functions as it should. And also what we do as well then is provide some really extensive online resources that help the students through that process. So we let them know exactly what is expected of them through good documentation. And there's a variety of ways that we can do that. One, this is for a history course, but we provided really extensive documentation with screenshots in this case to let the students know exactly what was expected of them every step along the way. Built directly into the Learn course so that they're still within that one setting, and again, they can refer back to the documentation as need be. That's kind of one method. Another way, this is more of a kind of step-by-step guide, but then related to actual links to help files too. There is a lot of help documentation that does already exist. So we just try to place the students in the right direction so that they know what to access and how to get the help that they need to in fact get. But again, that's kind of how it can look primarily. And then finally, just some quick examples of ePortfolios, and these are both in French, so if you can't read French, I apologize. But again, just some ideas of kind of the layout of them, as we saw just recently with Jane's as well, kind of what they can look like. And these are ones where the students are just asked to talk a little bit about themselves. Again, incorporate pictures. You can see the commenting in that one when the instructor is commenting on the submissions to the ePortfolio, giving them that immediate sense of feedback. But also on the left-hand side there, all the individual different kind of reflections that they can add to that ePortfolio, and then decide whether or not they want to share that with their fellow students and accept comments from their fellow students as well. That's just kind of one brief idea. And this one as well, again, it was the same course, but just slightly different customization, because again, the students can choose how they want it to look. Adding different pictures, making it relate to themselves. Again, we heard that time and time again today. Making the ePortfolio presentation really speak more to the student. It's not so much, do I have the correct content down? That's certainly part of it, but what does it mean for me? And these are what the students are doing, at least in this French course, making some of the French cultural content actually speak to them as students and make it more relevant. So yeah, that's my ePortfolio now, kind of all done up together. Any questions? No. Yeah, please.
Are there any mechanisms of integrating these?
Oh, microphone first? Yeah.
Thanks. Are there any mechanisms for integrating social media and stuff with these ePortfolios? Like if I had a class of 350 students and I said, everybody tweet in 140 characters your thought on this.
Right.
Could there be a way that they could have a hashtag or something that would go to their ePortfolios and it would be there sort of on record? Like I'm just thinking of, I mean, they come into university knowing Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and all that already.
Right.
And there's the learning curve for the instructors, but there's the learning curve for the students. And if there's some way, here's one more thing you have to learn. You have to learn, and you have to learn ePortfolio and everything else. Could that be a good bridge to kind of, they're already familiar with these things? Are there ways of linking them?
As far as I believe, not easy linkages, like they're complex.
Disable the ability to tweet the presentations because it wasn't permission-based, so I could tweet someone else's presentation without their consent. So as an institution, we decided to disable those features, so we turned off the Google Plus and tweet features on the presentations.
Right, to be able to distribute the content.
Right.
But what about receiving content?
There's no connection
There's
in
no
that
way to do
sense.
that?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
There is in Learn. You can have there's a tweet.
Yes, you
there's
can have a Twitter widget,
There's a Twitter
but
widget in
that's not
Learn that can then be,
ePortfolio.
you can have it on your course page somewhere and people can see what they've tweeted in.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, a little different, but yeah. Oh, question, Judy? Want to pass the microphone down first, perhaps?
I had a question about the peer access. You said that peers could also review the ePortfolio?
They could.
But where is that? Not in the Dropbox?
No, so what you can do, as we just had that discussion, they exist in their own kind of silo of sorts. Every student has access to their own and only their own. What you can do, however, is share that ePortfolio with a class. We create these kind of sharing tags, and then it does share with everyone in that single class. That's something that you just, again, that's why it's important to really conceptualize what this looks like ahead of time. If it's something where you want parts of the ePortfolio to be shared, we would just have to know beforehand so that we get that set up appropriately, permissions, all these kind of technical things correct. But then, yeah, from the get-go, students would be able to see each other's ePortfolios. As they add things, they could look at them as well and see the progression of their students. It's just something you would set up.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There's also an option to publicly share ePortfolio presentations. There's a checkbox on the presentation that if the student checks it, they can then share a special URL with anyone external to our institution who won't require login credentials to access it through the LE. Right, yeah. And then they can also disable it if they don't want it shared anymore for whatever reason. So.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Very much.